Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of our nervous system conversations. Have you noticed how one stressful week can completely change the way you see the world? Because in these situations, if you have noticed, we become more impatient, more reactive. Suddenly, it's like we lose the temper. For example, maybe somebody doesn't reply to our message and our mind immediately starts to create stories. We think, did I do something wrong? Or maybe they don't like me anymore. Or, we start thinking about what happened the last time we were with them. Or another situation would be that we catch ourselves when we snap with somebody we love, and afterwards we think, why did I react it like that? I'm such a terrible person, or that wasn't really me. So what actually happened in those situations is what we are going to explore in this episode, and I believe it's incredibly important to realize that stress affects us in a very meaningful way, because over time it begins to shape the way we think, the way we feel, and how we relate to ourselves and others. So as we spoke about in the previous episodes, stress builds up in the body when we don't really have the opportunity to slow down, to process our experiences, to process what happened, and return to a state of balance. So maybe we had a demanding period at work and it was difficult to switch off afterwards, This has happened to me so many times, and I was feeling complete anxiety sometimes, and all the time in this anxious mode. If I did everything and my mind was constantly on, I couldn't switch it off. Or maybe we received some bad news and it stayed with us for days, and it was hard to kind of like get out of it. Our mind was too much focused on it that it was hard to not to think on it. Another way how stress builds up is in those situations when we perhaps went through a painful argument with somebody we love, or even a breakup, and then the mind keeps replaying all conversations over and over again. So we try to understand what we did wrong, or how we could have reacted better, or what the other did and how it made us feel, and all these scenarios in our mind that keep on running. And of course, stress comes from any situation when we felt disappointed, rejected, misunderstood, hurt. And very often in these situations, we never really allow ourselves to feel those emotions, or simply we didn't know how to do that. And I think many of us were never taught how to process difficult emotions. We were just taught to keep going, to stay strong. Some of us were even said that crying is not good, or, even as a small children, many parents teach or say to their children, don't cry, you're not a baby. I hear that like this recently, and I was like, yes, of course she's baby. She's 2 years old, and it's okay, I think it's hard for parents sometimes to stay with the mantras of the children and simply let them express their emotions and just be there for their children in those moments as well, because if we were taught how to express our emotions, and that what we felt as children was valid, was seen, and wasn't neglected, then we would have learned how better to express our emotions, to stay with our emotions, to become aware of what that emotion probably is trying to teach us. And it would be easier to kind of integrate those difficult experiences instead of, numbing ourselves, distracting ourselves, moving on, staying strong when we're actually not strong and we can't move on, until we process what has happened. So emotions don't simply disappear because we ignore them. And when we allow ourselves to truly feel into them, that's when the healing begins. And sometimes it continues by asking a gentle question. What might this experience be inviting me to learn? Because perhaps it's inviting us to trust ourselves a little more, or to become more compassionate toward ourselves. Or perhaps is inviting us to learn how to set healthier boundaries, or maybe to let go of something we've been carrying for far too long. So when we don't take the time to process these experiences, they don't simply disappear. They remain in the background. And almost like unfinished conversations, they stay in our nervous system. So over time, they begin to influence. They influence how we respond to life. They influence how we see life. And it simply changes our perspective when we see life through the lenses of hurt and pain. Have you ever noticed that after a particularly stressful period, even the smallest thing can irritate you? Perhaps an example would be someone cuts in front of you in traffic, or a colleague makes a comment, or someone asks you to do something at work and you get really irritated, or just a simple question can irritate us. Or if your child spills something, and when we are completely regulated, we might smile or just respond. But during a stressful period, when we're not regulated, we suddenly explode. And actually, it's not because we are a different person, but because our nervous system has less capacity to deal with it. So we see that stress doesn't only affect our body, it affects the way we think, the way we feel, the way we relate to others. Another example can be, sending a message to a friend, and there's like hours go by and they don't reply. And when we are feeling grounded and regulated, we might think that they are probably busy. But when we are overwhelmed or stressed, our mind may immediately jump to make its conclusions and hundreds of stories. Like, did I say something wrong? Maybe they don't like me anymore. What if they're upset with me? And we have the same situation. It hasn't changed, but our nervous system has changed. So this is how we see that stress can also make us catastrophize things and assume the worst, lose perspective, feel more anxious, more irritable, and emotionally reactive. So some of us may start numb ourselves or scrolling endlessly. We throw ourselves into work, or we isolate. We become controlling. We want to have everything under control. When something is out of our plan, we get frustrated, Some other people simply feel exhausted, they don't even have the energy. They don't want to do anything. And after responding this way again and again, this is like a cycle, repeats and repeats. And this is how these type of reactions can gradually become patterns. And from a biological perspective, this makes a perfect sense because prolonged stress changes also the chemistry of the body. It increases our stress hormones like cortisol and makes the brain more likely to interpret situations as threatening, even when they may not be. So this is a reaction, what our brain has learned from the past. And anytime we meet similar situation from the past, our brain reacts the same way and increases our stress hormones, making the brain to interpret the situation as threatening. So it's a fact that our brain, our nervous system, our hormones, emotions, and even our immune system, they're all deeply interconnected. Because stress doesn't affect only the mind, it affects our whole body and the whole person. So what happens next? When the nervous system detects stress or danger, it prepares us actually to survive. And this happens through the sympathetic nervous system, the part of our autonomic nervous system that is responsible for mobilizing us into action. So to do something, to protect ourselves, to survive. And this is where something fascinating begins. Because our nervous system doesn't have only one way of protecting us, it has several. And you may have heard of them before. It's the fight and flight mechanisms. So fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn. And as we continue the podcast series, we will explore each of these protective responses in more depth. But here's something I'd really love you to remember, that these are actually protective mechanisms that are very intelligent ways our nervous system has adapted in order to keep us safe. So it doesn't mean it's something wrong with us, but it's just how our brain and our nervous system works. So these protective mechanisms were strategies that at one point in our life were exactly what we needed in order to protect ourselves, but we don't need them anymore. We don't need them in every situation that our brain gets triggered from. The beautiful thing is that the nervous system is very adaptive and it can learn a new different response. These patterns that we mentioned are just learned patterns, and this means that our nervous system can learn new ones, new patterns, better ones that can be more positive, more constructive, more self-loving, that will bring us much further in life, that will bring a better quality of life, that will bring us to feel beautiful within, to have more understanding, more compassion for ourselves, and to be more accepting of ourselves, of the others, of life, and to enjoy life. So what I want you to remember from today's episode also is that the goal of our nervous system regulation isn't to feel calm all the time, because life will always bring us challenges. It's impossible everything to be perfect all the time. It's not part of the human condition. We are not perfect. We all experience stress. We all feel fear, sadness, disappointment, or uncertainty in this world that we're living. So regulation is something that brings us flexibility. So it's the ability to experience stress, but then to recover, to be able to reconnect with ourselves and get back to balance again. So the more we practice this, the more resilient we become. because we are able to build strong mental and emotional embodied capacity. And this is something we can feel in the body. And this is the most valuable feeling, because the more we practice this, the more we are able to integrate the emotions and feel so grounded and balanced that whenever stressful situations come, we can process them and come back to balance faster and easier. Thank you so much for being here today. In the next episode, we'll begin exploring the first two protective responses of the sympathetic nervous system, which are fight and flight. And we will also discover what they might be trying to protect us from. So until then, take a gentle care of yourself and sending you lots of love.